This is the Art of Darkness podcast with Kevin Kautzman.
And Brad Kelly. We're a couple of very online writers interested in the dark side of what drives creative people to create against all odds.
This show is about art and the people who make it, what it costs them, and what it takes to bring something unique and impactful into the world.
Each episode, we excavate the life and work of an artist you might think you know.
Don't worry, they're all safely dead.
On every episode, we try and find out just what the hell was wrong with them and how they worked through their darkness to create something that lives on after them and continues to move culture.
Find us online at artofdarkpod.com and on Twitter at artofdarkpod. All right, we've got some sponsors for the pod now.
Wait, what?
Every link you need for the things we talk about here is at artofdarkpod.com/sponsors. First up, books.
If you're into this podcast, odds are you're probably a reader. We've got links to buy new books from bookshop.org and used books from alibris.com.
And if you want to listen to your books, we recommend and use audible.com.
It's great, and the catalog is huge.
All right. So if you're listening to this, you are online.
Maybe you're very online.
You probably have a website or are thinking of starting one. Maybe you want a website like artofdarkpod.com. We built that with WordPress, which is by far the most popular way to create websites. And the single best host for serious WordPress is WP Engine. I've personally used them for over a decade now, and I don't host my websites anywhere else. Go to artofdarkpod.com/sponsors and click on the WP Engine link to learn more.
Finally, the best way to support the show is at patreon.com/artofdarkpod. Get the bonus After Dark content for every episode, access to the book club, and more.
Thanks for supporting Art of Darkness. And I don't think that was too painful. I think we did a pretty good job there.
Yeah, that sounded good.
Yeah, we appreciate it. All right, now we have a special sponsor I want to tell you about here now today. Writer-director Dan Brown has a new play taking place at the Chain Theater on West 36th Street in New York City on January 7th, 2023. The 11-Story Drop, an evening of monologues, music, dance, and redemption, is a new collection of original fiction and musical compositions featuring characters facing a crossroads in their lives. These 11 acts tap into the heart and soul of audience members and just may lead you on a new path towards self-discovery. The 11-Story Drop will leave you asking, how did I get to this place in life and where do I go from here? The 11-Story Drop features comedy, dark drama, music, and dance to create an engaging and entertaining live show experience. Tickets are affordably priced and can be purchased at 11storydrop.eventbrite.com. That's 11storydrop, EVENSTORYDROP at eventbrite.com. Writer-director Dan Brown presents the 11-Story Drop, an evening of monologues, music, dance, and redemption at the Chain Theater on January 7th. Showtime is 7 p.m. And he's got something else going, Brad.
Yeah, so Dan Brown is also offering up 2 free tickets to an Art of Darkness listener. You can, if you're going to be in New York City, if you can be in New York City and you want to check this out, it's a really cool independent theater. This is a really cool project. Strongly recommending you check this out. If you want those free tickets, you can email us, artofdarkpod@gmail.com. We'll make sure that happens. Otherwise, go to 11storydrop.eventbrite.com to get tickets or other information. That's ELEVENSTORYDROP at eventbrite.com.
Yeah, right on. This is the kind of thing we want to support. Independent theater, people getting out there and making stuff. So
at 100%, yes.
100. Yeah, email us artofdarkpod@gmail.com. And it's going to be first come, first serve. So get at it.
I'm Brad Kelly. I'm here with my friend and co-host and podcast co-adventurer, Kevin Kautzman. Kevin, how are you doing?
Woo! That's my welcome to 2023 noise. Mm-hmm. That is my welcome, Sam Buntz of the Buntzcast, to the pod. And we are, thank you for coming on.
I'm at the same level of enthusiasm. It's all
Excellent.
being internalized though, and not. But I am
Right.
at the same level.
Right.
That's
I've
fair.
got enough woo in me for all three of us. I am jacked. We were fiddling with YouTube to get us ready to live stream. We're going to be doing more of that. So if you're in the Telegram, if you're hanging out with us, if you're on the tweeters, look out for that link. If you want to join, say something, do that. But this is still Art of Darkness. We're still doing the thing we do, and this is a dark room episode. And Brad, you organized this one with Sam. Do you want to introduce him?
Yeah. Sam and I got to talking, and we've known each other online. This is actually the first time we've ever sort of met, talking to each other, seeing each other, but we've been online friends for a while now. And Sam is a writer. His fiction includes short story collection, The Great American Cougar Hunt, the occult thriller novel, The God of Smoke and Mirrors, which I've read, quite good. Definitely check it out. If occult and thriller and funny all sound good to you, it's definitely something you're going to want to check out. He also maintains the website The Muted Trumpet. That's themutedtrumpet.wordpress.com. He's got a number of short stories, also poetry, culture writings, and more. As we mentioned, he's got the Buntz cast, rejuvenated coming into 2023. The Buntz cast. Definitely check that out. Guests include some friends of ours and some people we'd like to be friends with. So definitely check that out. And Sam is a multi-talented man. And I thought, who better to come on and talk about another multi-talented man? And that is G.I. Gurdjieff. So Sam, welcome. Thank you for coming and spending some time with us. It's really a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. I've enjoyed both of your Twitter commentary for a long time. We've been in a similar solar system on there for a while, I'd say.
Yeah, for sure. And same to you. I mean, Sam is a great Twitter follow at Sam Buntz. There's no numbers or anything. It's just that, right?
It's just not Sam Buntz.
Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, and another reason I thought that Gurdjieff would be a good candidate for you is Gurdjieff is your Avi.
Yeah, somehow I snapped that up. That became my main credential for talking about Gurdjieff, is that it's kind of weird to me because he has such an imposing look. He's kind of a Chad, really. You think that people would snap that up? You think you'd see more Gurdjieff profile pictures on Twitter, but you really don't. So
yeah, it's surprising. I do wonder what that's about, because Gurdjieff with red glowing eyes would be a pretty catchy, pretty meme-worthy image for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, maybe.
Well, I think that everybody on Twitter is trying to create their own cult. So if it's a little on the nose, present company excluded. I'm sure that you, Sam, are the exception to this. Yeah, I wonder why. That is interesting. Yeah. Gurdjieff with glowing eyes would be powerful. Mm-hmm. He was a Chad. We discovered on our core episode that we did, which was an early episode. I think Gurdjieff was one of the first 90-minute episodes or 100-minute episodes where we started to go, we can really start to go longer here. And I remember discovering that they don't even know how many children he has by how many women.
Right. Right.
That's true.
Yeah. that is pretty wild. Well, I mean, I say we get into it. Let me tease the After Dark for Patreon. Of course, we always do an extra 20 or 30 minutes, patreon.com/artofdarkpod. And on this episode, I have some of Gurdjieff's exercises, and I'm going to read a few of them on the main part of this. But then I'm going to save some additional ones for the After Dark. Which
you talking blasting his buys and tries, or what are we?
Right.
Okay.
100%. Yeah. You got Gurdjieff was all about lifting heavy, slonking eggs, and sunning various parts of your body. Yeah, of course. And shaving your head so that the rays of the sun, so that the solar rays could make your podcast better. Which is why
that one works. That one works.
It does. Yeah, it really does. Yeah, we're living proof of it. That's why this show is half the time. This show is quality. But then I also have some of his thoughts on sex, which I think will be quite interesting for Patreon After Dark, artofdarkpod.com, patreon.com/artofdark. So that's going to be fun. I want to get into it with you right now, Sam. How did you encounter Gurdjieff? That's a question that you can ask anybody, because he's he's in the culture. You can find him in bookstores, but it's one of these funny names. And yeah, when you find a Gurdjieff person, it's sort of like, ooh, okay, what do you know, and how did you come at it?
Yeah. Well, I think I saw a copy of Meetings with Remarkable Men, his autobiography, on someone's shelf in freshman year of college. And I actually still haven't read that book, but I sort of like noted it. And I was like, oh, that seems interesting. That seems like something that would be up my alley. And then later I was at the library in college, like looking for Gurdjieff related books. And I found one by J.G. Bennett, John Bennett, who was one of his students, called Is There Life on Planet Earth? And it's not like one of the more famous books about Gurdjieff. In Search of the Miraculous by P.D. Ouspensky is really the main and best introduction to Gurdjieff. But this book, it was like a short 120-page little introduction to his ideas. And I was intrigued by the title, Is There Life on Planet Earth? It's a reference to Gurdjieff's ideas that were, despite our pretensions towards being conscious or having free will, we're really just all in a state of sleep. We're just acting automatically and mechanically. And so the question, is there life on planet Earth? It's like a question, is there actual consciousness or real freedom on planet Earth?
It's a good title, and it's a good question too. I mean, it seems timeless in a way, but there's a certain quality of online interaction because I think something kind of has happened with the internet, for good and for ill, where we're all kind of meeting each other in a way that we weren't meeting each other before. You'd meet people at school, you'd meet people at work, people in your family, but mostly it was kind of 1 degree of separation or 2 degrees of separation kind of collapsing. That's basically how you're meeting people. And now we're all just meeting each other. And I do think you meet some incredible people. We get to make a connection like this, but then also every once in a while you run into people who are like, what are you talking about? Like, who are these aliens that think this thing? And I'm not going to say what that thing is, but just like, there is a certain sense like, man, wait, is there is there life on Earth, or is it just a bunch of quote unquote NPCs running around? Because sometimes it seems like it could be the latter.
And that immediately made me think of the great Bowie lyric, "Is there life on Mars?" And I know, Sam, you have a ripe copy of Beelzebub's Tales to his grandson. And I'm hoping at some point during the main episode here, you could maybe just read us a passage, like almost pick it up randomly. I think that would be fun to refresh ourselves a little bit about Gurdjieff's style. But I just did a quick search. And as so often happens with figures like this, Crowley, really many of the subjects we covered, but Gurdjieff, there's a Bowie connection, not directly, but I'm going to read what I found. All I did was search Gurdjieff and Bowie. And this is John McFerrin musicreviews.org. It took me about 2 listens to decide that this was going to be my favorite Bowie album for the rest of time. This is the second entry in Bowie's he's talking about Heroes, late 70s collaboration with Brian Eno. And for whatever it may have in common with Low, which is my favorite Bowie record, and for whatever it may be an advancement in the production and general approach, the biggest thing that sets this album apart from Low for me is that it actually has classics. Whereas Low simmered at a solidly very good level without contributing, in my opinion, a single all-time great Bowie track. Wrong. This album maintains wrong. The same baseline quality at worst while throwing out peaks repeatedly. There's not a single dud on Low, either the A side or the B side. And anyway. Eno and Bowie brought out the best in each other with this album. And when the contributions of Robert Fripp of King Crimson fame, in his first recording appearance since he temporarily decided to abandon the music industry and find life meaning in the fourth way, a system of spiritual thought taught by a man named Gurdjieff, are accounted for. That's a hell of a parenthetical are
Yeah.
accounted for, it's pretty much impossible for me not to love this album. Okay, blah, blah, blah. But there it is, right? So you've got David Bowie, you've got the great Fripp, and he nearly retired from music, or he did retire from music temporarily to go at Gurdjieff. And Fripp is exactly the kind of guy, don't you think, Sam, that would be intrigued? Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Also, people who you wouldn't necessarily expect, or maybe you would, have been, influenced by Gurdjieff. Like, it feels like he's exerted a lot of secret, invisible influence on the arts. Like Bill Murray is a follower of Gurdjieff, and probably the most famous one, I think. At least,
is that right?
That comes to mind. Yeah.
Wow.
Kate Bush was influenced by his ideas, and it's an interesting issue too with like this question. Sam Shepard as well, the playwright.
Oh, no shit! You're kidding me.
An actor.
Well, he used to live not far from where I live here in Minnesota.
Oh, really?
He used, Stillwater, Minnesota. You could still find a few bartenders down there who will tell you a Sam story, and it's funny because, of course, to me, he's on the mountain of great American playwrights and great American heroes, but Stillwater, Minnesota is the kind of town he could just walk downtown, go to a bar, nobody would say a word. I guarantee a lot of the people wouldn't know who he was, and he'd just sit and have a drink. Yeah, cool.
That is cool. But yeah, Gurdjieff's own views on art, you can see how he would influence the arts, but it's also kind of he was sort of dismissive of a lot of the art in all areas being created because he saw it as just a product of people's mechanical, associative, sleeping minds at work. He didn't see in a lot of art like what he wanted, which was, he called it like objective art. It was art that could create an emotional effect in you that would be like, it wouldn't be random. You would like have to feel that way because the art would be so constructed as to automatically bring out that reaction in you. I forget what examples. Okay, I think the examples he gave of that were in the area of architecture more. It was like the pyramids and I think the Taj Mahal. But I don't know. I'm not sure what his views were on like novels, for instance, or music. Though he did make music. He helped this composer, Thomas de Hartmann, sort of transcribed Gurdjieff's these musical ideas that Gurdjieff had.
Yeah, and you could go and listen to this stuff now. I mean, I saw a live performance of the de Hartmann Gurdjieff music, and it is it's emotionally compelling. It really is. It puts you in a kind of trance.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes you sort of slow down and pay attention.
So that's the effect he's getting from everybody. It's interesting because we had from a very different angle, a similar conversation in our Norm Macdonald episode. Norm Macdonald, great comedian, was saying comedy is not an art because you're trying to get the same response out of everyone. You're trying to make everybody laugh. And by his definition, that made it not art, which I just think is an interesting sort of other side of the coin.
Yeah.
I've got something here about Bill Murray. This is from Open Culture. But what influence best explains Murray's distinctive on-screen and increasingly performance art-like off-screen behavior today? Maybe that of his one-time teacher. Well, I don't know what that means. I mean, I don't think Gurdjieff was alive. I don't think, well, in any case, the Greco-Armenian Sufi mystic, G.I. Gurdjieff, who, as Murray's Ghostbusters co-star Harold Ramis put it, used to act really irrationally to his students, almost as if trying to teach them object lessons. Yes, we'll get into that a little bit. He taught what he called the fourth way of enlightenment, or more fittingly in Murray's case, the way of the sly man, who can find the truth in everyday life by remaining simultaneously aware of both the outside world and his inner one while not getting caught up in either. The sly man thus exists between and uses the world, the self, and the self that is observing everything.
Well, there is a bit of Bill Murray in that. I mean, this is kind of quieted down, but there was a sort of a period, I don't know, around 2010 or so, where like there were always these stories popping up about Bill Murray. There's a story about him stealing somebody's Diet Coke at a baseball game or something and saying, no one will ever believe you, right? And there's a story about him Kevin, when you and I lived in Texas, not that we were there for it, but he just stepped behind the bar in Austin and started serving drinks, but he served tequila shots to everyone who ordered anything. And then there's stories of him like occasionally just showing up to somebody's house party, hanging out, and then doing the dishes and leaving. So yeah, there is something kind of like, and all of those will make you go, wait, huh? What?
Yeah, I mean, it even shows it as sort of his comic style, which is like he's watching himself do the thing that he's doing, and it sets him apart from the other comic actors. And in the right combination, it's like perfect. Like he makes Ghostbusters, of course. Just absolutely hilarious. I did not know that, Sam. So the Bill Murray Gurdjieff connection, that made my day. So thank you. I was you mentioned the de Hartmans as well. Are you familiar with the book that they wrote, Our Life with Mr. Gurdjieff?
Yeah, I am actually. I read part of it. I liked it. I thought it was interesting. It's like a very simple and straightforward book, but it kind of gives you a good idea of like what living with Gurdjieff was really like, and what he meant to people, you know, why he ended up having this huge influence.
Well, it's kind of a great adventure story. I have some reading about this. If you'd like to, maybe I could share it as a launching off point. How does that sound? All right. So I'll read a few. Yeah, I'll read a few paras. Let me get to the Gurdjieff part, because of course and this is in the Gurdjieff International Review. And I kind of like the Gurdjieffans because their websites look like almost like Craigslist. Like a lot of them, they're kind of old school. They were very early to the internet. They don't need the next level.
They don't need an app, you know.
Yeah, I don't. Well, but they probably have one, but that's neither here. It's probably awesome. But in any case, they have all of these journals and reviews, and it has the kind of the veneer of almost an academic kind of a study, but nobody's really kind of fooled. You know, yeah. I mean, we're still talking about a fringe figure. Is that fair to say, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like, you wouldn't have scholars citing Gurdjieff in their analyses of religion or culture,
right?
Which is maybe a shame. I don't know. I mean, maybe that
it can't be any worse than Foucault. So you know, a lot of it is fashion, isn't it?
Yeah, and Foucault is the number one most cited scholar, not just in the humanities, but in any field.
Is that tremendous. Right? Foucault?
Yep. So when more bridges start collapsing, right. We'll know it's because some engineer was trying to get tenure. In any case, let's read a little bit about this. In 1916, de Hartmans and Thomas de Hartmann was the court composer to the Tsar.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He was very, very well connected, if I'm not mistaken.
Before the revolution, right?
Well, yeah. So Thomas de Hartmann. Let me
place this in time.
Yeah. I haven't done like an extreme amount of prep for the darkroom here, but let me just make sure I'm accurate. I mean, he was the composer. Mm-hmm. Let's find it. One moment.
Yeah. So this
Yeah, he was like living in the Winter Palace when they escaped with Gurdjieff. I mean, it was just this like, if I'm not mistaken, it's been a while. This is an incredible story to get to the bottom of. So let me read some. Where is it here? I have it. Thomas de Hartmann. No, I want to get it here. So 1916. In 1916, de Hartmann's spiritual life was profoundly affected when, in a prostitute-filled cafe, I like that detail, on the Nevsky Prospect in St. Petersburg, he was introduced to George Ivanovich Gurdjieff. De Hartmann later wrote in his and Olga's extraordinary memoir, Our Life with Mr. Gurdjieff, after this meeting, my life sort of became a fairy tale. Olga de Hartmann amplified. Mr. Gurdjieff was an unknown person, a mystery. Nobody knew about his teaching. Nobody knew his origin. But whoever came into contact with him wished to follow him. and so did Tomas de Hartmann and I, and follow him they did. They remained in his immediate orbit and under his spiritual tutelage for the next 12 years, with Thomas serving as, among other things, accompanist and composer in residence, while Olga served as Gurdjieff's personal secretary. Gurdjieff, having spent much of his life traveling to spiritual centers in the Middle and Far East, appeared in St. Petersburg in 1913 under a cloak of mystery and intrigue. He was a nomadic Georgian mystic, the core of whose wisdom was centered around the idea that man was not born with an immortal soul. With the right kind of spiritual work, however, an immortal soul could be formed. Without undertaking such work under Gurdjieff's carefully measured guidance, a person was no better than a machine, leaving their art, life, and culture without meaning. I'll read a little more here. In 1917, revolution brought an end to Tsarist rule in Russia, and with it, chaos and uncertainty. Members of the nobility and military officers, including de Hartmann, feared angry reprisals from the Bolsheviks. De Hartmann craftily secured travel papers through his crumbling military contacts, and he and Olga immediately left St. Petersburg. They headed for the Caucasus, a rugged mountainous area in southern Russia, hoping to make a rendezvous with Gurdjieff. The following day, military police arrived at the de Hartmann's apartment in St. Petersburg to arrest them, only to find it empty. The de Hartmanns soon met up with Gurdjieff in Essentucky. Is that how you say that? Essentucky.
I don't know.
That's Essentucky. It's next to, and began a period
next to Tennessee.
Right, exactly, right. And began a period of intense spiritual work. With Gurdjieff as their guide and with a group of other adherents, they continued their extraordinary escape through the Caucasus, first to Sochi and later to the imperial stronghold of Tbilisi. And this goes on, which is just wild.
Yeah, wasn't Thomas de Hartmann for part of this was like deathly ill for part of this flight, is my understanding. And Gurdjieff is sort of like, keeping him
alive,
body and soul. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Quite intense.
I think that a good introduction to Gurdjieff is to read the Ouspensky book that Sam mentioned in Search of the Miraculous. Read this biography, and then maybe try to read some Gurdjieff.
Yeah, his of Gurdjieff's own writings, Views from the Real World, which I have here. It's like a compendium of actual talks that he gave to his followers. Okay. And it's pretty easy reading. It's like because it shows him sort of like working as a teacher and presenting these teachings to people. Whereas Beelzebub's Tales to his grandson is like this 1,000+, I don't know, 14 it's all cryptic and hard to understand. Like it's for the people who are already like, following Gurdjieff's path or whatever.
Right. The Tales from Beelzebub.
You're supposed to read it 3 times. Yes. Yeah. And why you're supposed to read all of Gurdjieff's writing 3 times. What were you going to say, Brad?
Well, I was just going to say when I first heard, and I haven't read any of Tales from Beelzebub, but when I first heard about it, I was like, this sounds a little bit like it could have been a prank. Like he might have been just sort of like, deal with that. Why don't you guys read that
1,000-page shit post?
I'm not saying it is. I don't even really understand what's in there, but that was my first impression. Like, I wonder what the deal is with that. But so this book, I'm sorry, the Views from the Real World, was it?
Yeah, Views from the Real World, early talks of Gurdjieff.
Interesting. Okay, because he was, and this must have been transcribed by his followers or something, I would have to imagine.
Yes.
Yeah. Interesting.
He roamed around through the world, really.
Right. Now he had what was it? The Institute for the
Harmonious Development of Man.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I have, why don't I read a little bit of Views from the Real World, and then maybe our friend Sam could read a little bit from Beelzebub's Tales.
That would be interesting to kind of pair them next to each other and compare them a little bit.
Well, here's the beginning of it. Let me see here. 1914, Glimpses of Truth, written by one of Gurdjieff's circle in Moscow. Strange events, incomprehensible from the ordinary point of view, have guided my life. I mean, those events which influence a man's inner life, radically changing its direction and aim and creating new epochs in it. I call them incomprehensible because their connection was clear only to me. It was as though some invisible person in pursuit of a definite aim had placed in the path of my life circumstances, which, at the very moment of my need, I found there as if by chance. Guided by such events, I became accustomed from my early years to look with great penetration into the circumstances surrounding me and to try to grasp the principle connecting them and to find in their interrelations a broader, more complete explanation. I must say that in every exterior result, it was the hidden cause evoking it that interested me most. One day in the court, and that's one para.
Mm-hmm.
One day, I mean, this guy he could gab.
Yeah.
One day in the course of my life, in this same apparently strange way, I found myself face to face with occultism and became interested in it as though in a deep and harmonious philosophical system. But at the very moment when I had reached something more than mere interest, I again lost, as suddenly as I had found it, the possibility of proceeding with its systematic study. In other words, I was thrown entirely on my own resources. This loss seemed a senseless failure, but I later recognized in it a necessary stage in the course of my life, and one full of deep meaning. This recognition came only much later, however. I did not deviate, but went forward on my own responsibility and at my own risk. Insuperable obstacles confronted me, forcing me to retreat. Vast horizons opened to my vision, and as I hastened forward, I often slipped or became entangled. Losing, as it seemed, what I had discovered, I remained wandering round on the same spot as though fog-bound. In searching, I had made many efforts and did apparently useless work, rewarded inadequately by results. Today, I see that no effort went unrewarded and that every mistake served to guide me toward the truth. And just a little more. I plunged into the study of occult literature, and without exaggeration can say that I not only read, but mastered patiently and perseveringly the greater part of the available material, trying to grasp the sense and to understand what was hidden between the lines. All this only served to convince me that I would never succeed in finding what I sought in books. Though I glimpsed the outlines of a majestic structure, I could not see it clearly and distinctly. That is, I'm not sure that I'm familiar with this book.
That's quite potent to me.
And clear.
Yes. Yeah. There's one couple things I just want to point out, and then I definitely want to hear some Beelzebub, just because I got stuff sparking off. I mean, the first part of that reminds me of this notion that, like, Kevin, I'm sure you've heard this, where it's like interesting stories happen to people who can tell them. And people who have interesting lives because they're interested in their life, right? It's this sort of like everybody's life is a chaotic epic adventure if they are willing to see it that way, right? And there's something special about the way he's doing it. And then, of course, he takes this dip into the occult, which, nobody I know is into that.
He's also setting up his sales pitch too. Let's not forget, Gurdjieff is a fantastic flim-flam man, right? He's basically saying, I did what all of you did, or what many of you did. I read all of the occult literature. I found my own secret meaning within it, and yet it was not enough. What did he find? And then, of course, I'm sure he goes on and talks about his travels and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But then, and of course, in his own way, he would then go on and write a voluminous, dense doorstop of a book that Sam's cracking open right now. And what do you have for us, Sam?
Here, actually, I think there's not like a great index in this, but I decided to look up.
We've got a passage
chapter. It outlines Gurdjieff's weird cosmology, which, normally the discussion of Gurdjieff starts off with this idea of the war between the mechanical, habitual nature of people and the possibility of actually being conscious. but the question of like, how did we get into this condition where our behavior is all mechanical and automatic and like we're like sleepwalkers. He outlines this in Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson. And Gurdjieff was even though some of his ideas, like the idea that we only have a soul in embryo and we need to do this like spiritual work before it can become immortal, that's like obviously a heretical idea from like a Christian perspective, but Gurdjieff was a Eastern Orthodox Christian. He was buried in the Eastern Orthodox Christian Church, and he grew up. His father was Greek and his mother was Armenian. So he grew up in Orthodoxy.
Well, he called his system esoteric Christianity.
Yeah. There's a lot of debate about where he got it from because he was never very forthcoming about where he actually learned this stuff.
Yeah.
That source you read about Bill Murray said that Gurdjieff was a Sufi, and that's usually, I think, cited as one of the main, most likely sources, but no one really knows, because it's so idiosyncratic in some ways, though it also syncs up with a lot of the mystical traditions.
Sure.
But
yeah, like a lot of his travels to the East, it's sort of like that's sort of biographically what we know. There were some travels to the East. There's not like a lot of, from my understanding, there's not a lot of, well, he went here and he talked to this guy and he went there and he talked to, it's sort of like he disappeared for a while and then he came back shrouded in enigma.
Kind of part of the myth that he
it's cool. It's very cool.
And I just want to put a pin in what I said about the de Hartmans earlier. A lot of that might have just been hearsay. Look up the Wikipedia if you want to know about de Hartman, but he was definitely kind of part of the Russian military, like the Imperial Army and everything. And in any case, very interesting story there. But Sam, continue.
Yeah, so this is a passage relating to how humanity got into this state of mechanical sleepwalking behavior. It says that
I just drink the sleepy time tea with the bear on it. All right. Okay.
Let's see. He says that and this will give you a good impression too of how densely written this book is.
Perfect.
He says it is necessary to notice that in the great universe, all phenomena in general, without exception, wherever they arise and manifest, are simply successively law-conformable fractions of some whole phenomenon, which has its prime arising on the most holy sun, absolute. And in consequence, all cosmic phenomena, wherever they proceed, have a sense of objectivity. And these successively law-conformable fractions are actualized in every respect, and even in the sense of their involution and evolution, owing to the chief cosmic law, the sacred heptaparaparshinok. Only time alone.
The sacred law of heptaparaparshinok.
Yeah, is that what it is?
Yeah, it's the law of seven. That's his funny name. Yeah, sorry to mog you there, Sam. I love saying heptaparaparshinok. I just think it's great. Yeah.
Only time alone has no sense of objectivity because it is not the result of the fractioning of any definite cosmic phenomena, and it does not issue from anything, but blends always with everything and becomes self-sufficiently independent. Therefore, in the whole of the universe, it alone can be called and extolled as the ideally unique subjective phenomenon. Thus, my boy, uniquely time alone, or as it is sometimes called, the hero pass, has no source from which its arising should depend, but like divine love, flows always, as I have already told you, independently by itself, and blends proportionately with all the phenomena present in the given place and in the given arisings of our great universe.
Wow. I'm going to take Brad's bingo card spot here and go, wait, what?
Like, I would need to probably read that 3 times to really get it. I'm so thrown off by say it again, Kevin, the
heptaparaparshinok.
Interesting.
The sacred law of seven, basically.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me see if I can find some.
Wow.
Heptaparaparshinok. Oh, it's a song by Robert Fripp.
Really interesting.
That's
that makes
perfect.
Sense.
Yeah. Well, let me read a little bit of it. Thank you for that reading. That was fabulous. And you're very, very clear about it. I'm going to read a little bit from the Wikipedia about Beelzebub's tales to his grandson. Throughout the book, Gurdjieff gave certain meaning to many of his original words, such as triamazakamno, the law of three, heptaparaparshinok, law of sevenfoldness, and soliunensius, certain cosmic law, and so forth. Whether Gurdjieff invented these words or applied certain concepts to them is unclear. Many of these words have roots in modern languages, while others have roots in ancient languages. Another possibility is noted in Life is Real Only Then When I Am, another one of his books, where Gurdjieff wrote that he accidentally learned of the word soliunensius from a whirling dervish. Gurdjieff applied these words to minor concepts as well as some major ones. One of the major concepts is where Gurdjieff applies the word has-namus to certain types of people. According to Beelzebub's tales, has-namus is a being who acquires something which creates certain harmful factors for himself as well as for those around him. According to Gurdjieff, this applies to average people as well as to those who are on higher levels. This something is formed in beings as a result of the following manifestations. I'm going to read these. Every kind of depravity, conscious as well as unconscious. The feeling of self-satisfaction from leading others astray. The irresistible inclination to destroy the existence of other breathing creatures. The urge to become free from the necessity of actualizing the being efforts demanded by nature, the attempt of every kind the attempt by every kind to artificially conceal from others what, in their opinion, are one's physical defects, the calm self-containment in the use of what is not personally deserved, self-contentment. I'm going to read this one again because it's so good. The calm self-contentment in the use of what is not personally deserved. That's heavy. And then this final one is also heavy. The striving to be not what one is. And you pick up almost like this force of, well, in any case, that book is heavy.
Yeah, it's very heavy. And I think like a lot of people hearing that passage that I read would like roll their eyes at that and be like, well, this is just, it's just gibberish. But that's because like that's the way Beelzebub's tales to his grandson is sort of written, because he wanted his disciples, his followers, I don't think he would have called them disciples, but the people in his group, the groups that he created and led, to like really focus in and like think about this book and like concentrate on it, but a lot of these ideas are presented in Search of the Miraculous and in the other books in a much more lucid, easier to understand format. Like he's talking about how the universe is governed by time and by these cosmic laws that come into being. And the cosmic laws are just what we're subject to as they're what make us mechanical, unthinking, habitual beings, just driven on by the motions of our own thoughts and feelings, but yeah, when you read this stuff in like in the Ouspensky book, he talks about like the heptaparaparshinok. Ouspensky, I don't think he uses that term exactly, or if he does, he just calls it like the law of seven, and then the other set of laws is the law of three, which is like the law of three is basically this idea that in the world, we're subject to like these three forces, which you could kind of compare to like the Trinity of Hinduism, Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu, or to like Hegel's idea of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. It's this idea of like, Gurdjieff calls them affirming, denying, and reconciling. It's like similar to like Brahma is the creator, Shiva is the destroyer, Vishnu is the preserver. So like in this life, we're subject to these forces of like a positive affirming force, a negative denying force, and then the reconciling or synthesis between them, And the question though is, how do you sort of like reckon with that fact? How do you maybe even transcend those influences, or how do you have them operate on you in a way that would make you a more like a fully awakened being?
Well, and didn't he say like man is a 3-brained being, something to that effect? Yeah. So it's as above, so below.
Yeah, because for Gurdjieff, there's like 3 main centers in a human being, which are it's really just thought, emotion, and then like physical kinetic being, motion and action, but his
thought, emotion and horny.
For Gurdjieff it was probably.
I'll save this for the sex segment that we're going to put on Patreon, but he does say some interesting things in views from the real world about the role of sex energy in the human being, but his view is just that these three centers in us, our thoughts, our emotions, and our physical actions, are all out of sync. Like they're not working together under the control of one conscious self. Like Gurdjieff sees us as having no, like when he says like there's no immortal soul, he's saying that like we're subject to the winds and passions of our own constantly changing being. Like there's no master and commander at the center of our thoughts and emotions and actions. They're all just
unless we create one. Unless you cultivate the master. Yeah.
And his main method for doing that is called self-remembering, where you just, instead of getting lost in your thoughts and emotions, you try to like remember that you are there. Like there is the idea is like to crystallize this real a real consciousness, a real
because otherwise your energy is just taken by the moon. Man is food for the moon, which
that's another one of the weird ideas that people get, I think would turn people off. Like I remember the like atheist secular Buddhist podcaster guy Sam Harris. He was like dismissive of Gurdjieff because I think of all the moon stuff. But the moon stuff, it's like another one of these things where it's like it's weird, but what he kind of means by it isn't entirely clear. Like he might be literally talking about his whole idea is that on Earth, like the way he talks about in Beelzebub's Tales is like the universe is sort of this system where like the lower forces of existence are harvested to like feed these higher beings and entities and forces in this sort of cosmic hierarchy.
Very Gnostic kind of the archons and Loosh and all, kind of adjacent to those ideas.
And we're trapped in this, and that the moon exerts this like influence on us where it keeps us in this state of sleep, and then our energy is like harvested by the moon and then brought up to these like higher levels of being.
I don't have it like my familiarity with reading occult texts and esoteric texts, and I haven't dug deep into Gurdjieff. You mentioned that somebody might hear this and kind of roll their eyes, and I guess I do get that, but like I'm not going to say I totally grasped what that point of that Beelzebub passage was, but this is how a lot of esoteric and occult texts work. There's a lot of it is analogizing, so you can kind of sort of understand things at a more imagistic level, pulling in metaphors that might make things make sense, and then also almost sort of dramatizing the concepts themselves so that they sort of come at you a certain way, right? Because otherwise you can fall into, because some of this stuff that we're talking about, and I'm kind of nodding my head at all of this. This all sounds reasonable. Some of this you could break down and repackage as like modern cognitive behavioral therapy in like much drier language. That would be a lot less interesting. That would make me roll my eyes. Like I'd rather hear about it being food for the moon. That sounds
right. I mean, is he not? He's sort of talking about actualizing the self, establishing boundaries,
right?
Avoiding negative influence. I mean, you could just
and this whole idea is the thing of like you aren't actually your emotions. You should remember who you are when you're having an emotional experience. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know anybody who wouldn't tell you that. And that's not to disparage what Gurdjieff's saying and saying it's obvious and simple, but like these things do. Every time like Kevin or we had James Ellis on to talk about Gurdjieff, every time I hear a new concept from him, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. That totally makes sense. I'm getting Gurdjieff pilled hard.
He was a huge influence on the New Age.
Mm-hmm. You can see why. Yeah.
Like just the use of the term consciousness, which gets bandied around, a lot now, that he was arguably, at least I heard someone say this, like maybe the first person to really use the word consciousness like a lot in a spiritual sense.
Like raise your consciousness, elevate your consciousness. Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
So, I have a book by one of his later devotees, E.J. Gold. Are you familiar with E.J. Gold?
No, I'm not.
He wrote a pretty succinct book on Gurdjieff's ideas. I don't have a copy of it any longer. It's out there somewhere, but it's called The Human Biological Machine as a Transformational Apparatus. And it's a re-syncretizing of Gurdjieff's concepts in very, very simple language. Simple-ish language. He was friends with Lily, the dolphin guy.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So you see these connections happening. Yeah.
This book that I'm holding up for YouTube, which is youtube.com/@artofdarkpod. I'll describe it for people who are listening. The Hidden Work. And this book is something Gurdjieff, or rather Gold, wrote to try to explicate Gurdjieffian ideas on the nature of prayer. And the core idea that Gold has in this book is that true prayer, objective prayer, like the objective art you mentioned earlier, Sam, is not where we pray for ourselves, but rather when we pray for the absolute. We pray for the healing of all things. It's quite dense. Yeah, go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, I don't know if Gurdjieff recommended this, but I know that when Ouspensky had these spiritual experiences with Gurdjieff, he was also practicing the prayer of the heart, or the Jesus prayer, which is just saying, Jesus Christ, have mercy on me, over and over again, which is, part of Eastern Orthodoxy. And I remember Gurdjieff commenting on prayer where he said, for a prayer to be effective, it can't be truly mindless. Like you can't sort of just be uttering the words with your mouth while your mind is elsewhere. There has to be a real intention, a real conscious wish and desire behind the prayer.
It sounds like it needs to be at the three levels. What are the three levels? The physical, the emotional, and the mental.
Yeah,
it sounds like it has to be all three.
It would have to be engaging all of that.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, in this book he calls it prayer absolute. And he talks about how in the past, and this is E.J. Gold, he wrote this, prayer absolute, the method of ascension to the cross, was so commonly known by everybody that ancient initiates never thought it necessary to encapsulate it in initiations to be passed down from their century to ours. Prayer as it is today is useless in the objective sense because all contemporary prayer is subjective, even when sending up waves of good vibrations to Mr. God in heaven. And then he goes on, we must fully realize that praise is not prayer, nor is prayer religion. We should strive to learn the meaning of the phrase, bene orase est bene laborase, which means to pray well is to work well. In ancient Egypt, prayer absolute was well known. It was called the hidden work, and records were kept by the temple priests of their attempts to meet this obligation toward the absolute. So this is just one example of a dude, and I think he's a very California guy, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if he's still around and kicking, right. But and this stuff is everywhere. I mean, we're talking about the New Age and new spirituality in the 60s and the 70s. It's Gurdjieff and Crowley, and yeah.
One thing, Sam, I wanted to get to, because I wanted to give you a chance to talk about some of the stuff that you have done and are doing. But maybe we can start by saying, sort of, do you find as a writer and a thinker, and how do you feel like this Gurdjieff stuff makes its way into your process, or does it? I mean, when do you find yourself writing a novel, writing a short story? Is there some bit of Gurdjieff in you, in your head? Does that make sense?
Well, definitely not with every story. Like, it's not enough of a. I mean, it definitely, reading his writings, and in particular Ouspensky's, In Search of the Miraculous, definitely had a big effect on me. But it's not like it's not like a path that I actually personally follow or anything. I'm just like interested in it. But all right, where was I going with this?
Well, you're writing and you were reading.
Oh yeah. So when I was writing the book that you read, Brad, The God of Smoke and Mirrors, that I was consciously thinking about Gurdjieff and Rudolf Steiner actually too. When I was writing that book, that was just the mythology that I created in that book and everything was influenced, I would say, by both of those guys. But
yeah, why don't you take a minute too? Like, take a minute and talk about that book if you'd like. Or the other book, The Great Cougar. I'm sorry, it's a Great Cougar Hunt, right?
The Great American Cougar Hunt.
Great American Cougar Hunt. I knew I was missing a word. Okay. Yeah, I mean, either one of those, but maybe it makes more sense to talk about The God of Smoke and Mirrors at this point. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, part of the book involved well, I don't want to give away too much, but I guess I kind of gave this away already. Maybe there's like a hyper addictive smartphone game called Silly Squirrels that figures in the plot, and the game involves you like controlling a little squirrel and like hoarding acorns and just picking up acorns. It's not like described in too much detail what this entails, but it involves picking up acorns. And but it actually, has this like evil occult origin to it. And it's like this consciousness harvesting device, so that was the sort of mythology I created behind that, and the why this was happening and everything. That was specifically where I think the influence of reading Gurdjieff came into this whole
man is food for the squirrel.
Something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Very good.
Very cool. Very cool. I noticed that. I felt reading it, I felt there's like, there's some, and again, I am the Gurdjieff neophyte on this pod. But yeah, reading that, I felt like, there's some Gurdjieff between the lines on this for sure. And just general, you have clearly some knowledge about the occult, but also a good sense. There's the content of like esoteric stuff and occult stuff, but then there's also the vibe of it, the sort of the aesthetic of it. And you captured that really well. Without letting it take the book over, if that makes sense. So yeah, I was like, this guy knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, it hopefully has a pretty light tone. Like, it's supposed to be funny.
It's very funny. Yeah.
It's not supposed to be like Beelzebub's Tales.
No, it's not. I would say funny is the first adjective in my description of it for sure. But you also know what you're talking about when it comes to the Gurdjieff stuff and the occult stuff and the esoteric stuff. So it's a really cool read. It's a romp. I would say it's a romp. I think that's fair.
That's good. Here, I'm trying to see if I have a copy of it.
Let's go on a romp.
There was a quote in it that I took. It's attributed to the correct source that I found in one of the Gurdjieff books. Actually, it was it's not a Gurdjieff book by Gurdjieff, but it's by Jacob Needleman, who is like a student of Gurdjieff and like a philosopher at the San Francisco State University, I think.
Okay.
And he's a really interesting guy. And but he wrote this book called Lost Christianity, which is, Gurdjieff said that his teachings were esoteric Christianity. So Lost Christianity is kind of looking into the surviving remnants of this like esoteric tradition. And Needleman talks with this Eastern Orthodox priest, Anthony of Sorouge, is it, I think, his name? And so let's see.
Yeah, take your time. I have some exercises from Gurdjieff too. I'm going to, as we sort of wind down, I'm going to read a few of them. we'll tease the after dark. Then we'll come back for another 30 minutes and talk more with our friend Sam Buntz, who, yes, did you find it?
So, sorry, no, well,
That's all right. No worries.
I'm wasting the time of whoever is listening to
No,
the.
that's
Oh,
all
not
right.
at all. No, none of our listeners.
I
No
thought I would-
time
I
up
thought
with
I'd
Art of
turn-
Darkness is wasted. My God. When you think of all the things that they could be doing instead, they could be, as Gurdjieff says, they could be doing his first exercise, which is, and Brad, I really want you to internalize what I'm about to say here.
Okay.
Let me just do the first three, and then Sam, you can take over. Number one, and Brad, I really want you to focus on this. You too, Sam.
Focused.
Join in. Number one, the effort to realize I have a body. So that's the first exercise.
I could feel as soon as you said body, I actually felt it like my attention, Pat. That was interesting. Okay.
I'm going to read two more. The third one has an A and a B. 2. And I encourage listeners to participate if you care to. The effort to realize that I descended into and became attached to this organism, this animal, for the purpose of developing it. 3. The attempt to realize the organism's mechanicity. A, its habitual reaction to recurrent situations. B, the magnetic relationship of the centers.
That last one.
Chill it out with Gurdjieff.
Yeah, that last one I don't. That last one I don't totally get, but okay.
He just wants to lift you up out of living in a reactive state of mind so that you can realize the I that is driving the meat machine of the body. That's the core of what he's at. And then a bunch of other stuff gets layered on. I think Sam found his passage. Sam, did you find it?
I did, yeah.
All right.
It was from Anthony Bloom, who was metropolitan of like the Western Europe in the Eastern Orthodox Church. He was like I think that was his position, but he wrote, if you watch your life carefully, you will discover quite soon that we hardly ever live from within outwards. Instead, we respond to incitement, to excitement. In other words, we live by reflection, by reaction. We're completely empty. We do not act from within ourselves, but accept as our life a life which is actually fed in from the outside. We're used to things happening which compel us to do other things. How seldom can we live simply by means of the depth and the richness we assume that there is within ourselves?
I like that. Yeah, it's interesting. And it actually made me think, you had mentioned Sam earlier. You had mentioned another Sam Harris. And Sam Harris, part of his project seems to be to get you to like kind of accept that you basically don't have a consciousness, certainly don't have like any kind of free will. And it's sort of interesting because that the way that he frames it, he's like, just pay attention to your mind and just thoughts pop in, you're not controlling them. Like there is a way that Sam Harris is sort of saying kind of the same thing, but Sam Harris's thing is sort of like, so you're not, so it's almost like, so none of this matters.
It's without the, without the part where you then take the next step.
Right. It's just like, there's no thoughts in your head. And so who cares? And so whatever. Yeah.
It's kind of funny because one thing I thought was an interesting connection is like, he would be, Sam Harris would be associated with like the secular side of the mindfulness meditation, and an interesting point that this one scholar of Tibetan Buddhism made is that like the word that gets translated as mindfulness in the West in the original Buddhist texts in the Pali Canon, I forget the exact word, but what it actually means is it means remembering. It means remembering who you really are. And that was Gurdjieff's term for his main spiritual practice was to self-remembering. It was to remember who you really are.
Right. And mindfulness has this slight, almost like separation to it, rather as opposed to remember who you are, which goes down through the 3 levels, right? mindfulness is like, oh, you've got this little gadget in your head and like pointed at things. Like,
well, and it's all couched in this arch Protestant productivity cult that the West sort of operates under as the big machinery in the sky, right? If you're more mindful, you'll be more productive and you'll be happier, and it has all of that weight bogging it down. But that is such an interesting fact. Yeah, Sam, about that translation.
I love that.
I always thought that was something kind of weird about Sam Harris, is that he learned from Tibetan Buddhists and from Tibetan monks, but in actual Tibet and with these monks and people he learned from, mindfulness and this kind of meditation is entirely part of a quest for transcendence, which, takes the belief in reincarnation and things like that, very seriously. But he kind of took out that whole transcendent element.
Yeah, careful when you're being syncretic, folks, that you don't throw away the good stuff, right? Like, this pick and choose stuff it's cool to do, but there's also like every once in a while, it's like, you forgot all the other stuff.
And maybe I don't know that much about Sam Harris, but then you're always, subconscious bias. Well, be careful you just don't recreate Calvinism over and over, right? Or whatever else, that's operating in the atmosphere that you don't, that you don't know is operating on you. I really like Gurdjieff as a figure too, coming out of seeing the revolution, World War I, the revolution, and then World War II, and just Europe was clamoring for these teachers. People could see the world ending. I mean, especially after World War I, my God, they needed somebody to go, what the hell just happened? And can you imagine all the dead men and all the dead women, people after World War I, the flu and everything? Everybody's just and
platitudes
around to
platitudes weren't going to cut it either, right? Like it wasn't going to cut it to be like, well, no, it'll all work out. Like you needed something a little firmer than that.
Ouspensky said that one of the key moments for him in realizing the truth of Gurdjieff's teachings was, Gurdjieff talked about the terror of the situation that we were in, and since World War I was going on at that time, it was like a perfect illustration of the sort of mindless mechanistic violence that we could fall into. And Ouspensky, that came home to him when in, I guess, St. Petersburg or wherever he was at that time, he saw a truck loaded up with prosthetic legs that were all going to soldiers who had lost their limb fighting on the Eastern Front. And that to him was like a moment where he truly saw the like pointlessness of the war,
Like
with Gurdjieff, nonviolence is maybe not not necessarily like literal pacifism. I don't really know what Gurdjieff thought about that, but he definitely was against war. He was against violence and like the sort of this mindless mechanical process that we're engaged in. Like violence is a key part of that.
It seems like, just in my very meager understanding, that the violence conceptually is one thing, but done out of this just reactive, asleep, machine-like thing is horrifying, right? Maybe there is a circumstance where violence actually makes sense and you're really occupying it, right? But this just like, well, you got a gun and they're supposed to shoot that guy, and just kind of dumbly going through it is terrifying. Absolutely. Well, we're kind of winding down these, kind of getting to the end. Sam, I do want you, so you've got your book, the two books that are out. Is there any other books out? It's those two, right? I'm not missing any. No, I know you've got a lot of writing out there, though.
There's the short story collection, The Great American Cougar Hunt, and then there's the novel, The God of Mirrors. But I hope to have another short story collection out sometime this year. So
excellent, awesome. And the Buntzcast, what's going on with that? So you got some stuff coming up soon on there that you can kind of tease, or?
So my friend Nathan Worcester, who is a journalist, he popped on the podcast, and he's actually like an energy journalist for the Epoch Times. We didn't really talk that much about that. He lives here in Chicago. We did talk maybe a little bit about energy, but it really had just a lot to do with like Chicago. Like we talked about, Nathan was like taking a walk and went by Louis Farrakhan's house, and we talked about Louis Farrakhan for a while. We
All right.
kind of just like ranged. It was a very wide ranging conversation.
Oh, that sounds cool. That sounds really cool for sure. Well, yeah, folks, look out for that. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's really exciting stuff. And it's great that you've got these books coming out. I really appreciate you coming on. I always enjoy meeting somebody who's ready to talk about Gurdjieff. And you taught me some things that I didn't know about those connections with cool. Bill Murray. And yeah, very cool. And really appreciate it. I hope you had a good time. No, yeah, we're going to go for another 30 minutes for the After Dark. But before we do, I'm making the show art. And typically what I do is layer somebody's face or their avatar over the core episode image that we have. But your avatar is Gurdjieff and like Gurdjieff on top of Gurdjieff. I don't know if that works. So what should I lay on top of Gurdjieff in this sort of cinematic way?
Man.
Just put the red eyes on there.
Oh, yeah, I'll put laser eyes on Gurdjieff. There we go.
That's a good idea. Yeah,
maybe not red. Is there another color?
Well, no, because these are dark. These are gray because it's the dark room. So I'll just do laser eyes for Gurdjieff on behalf of Sam Buntz. Very exciting. We're going to laser eye the moon. We're going to. Kubrick and his people are going to have to get out of the way. Sam, can you give us your ad again? Give us your links and stuff, and then we'll come back for the After Dark.
So I'm at Sam Buntz, SAMBUNTZ at twitter.com. And let's see. My blog, The Muted Trumpet. It's themutedtrumpet.wordpress.com. A lot of my writing's on there. My Patreon also is linked to through my Twitter, and that's where you can listen to the Buntzcast, though it's also on like Spotify and Apple
iTunes.
Yeah.
Okay.
iTunes. Yeah. So, sorry.
Yeah.
No, not at all. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's pretty much my online presence. I mean, I've written for a Thwart and some other magazines online, The Critic, so you can find my writing there too.
Very cool. Yeah, check it out. Yeah, I was reading through the Muted Trumpet today. Good stuff on there, man. Yeah, I'm like looking forward to what comes next there for sure. So people check that out.
Gotta update it.
Why is the trumpet muted?
Oh, let's see. There's a couple reasons for that. I think Miles Davis said that I remember reading an interview where he was like, I like using a muted trumpet because it sounds more human. Sounds more like a human voice, I guess. And so that was part of it. And I think that I've been kind of thinking of the like muted post horn symbol from the Crying of Lot 49.
Okay, that's what I was thinking when I read it. Yeah, okay. Interesting. Very cool.
And yeah, so that symbolizes like a secret underground system of communication, which felt sort of fitting for a blog.
Yeah, I dig it. Cool. Well, we're going to come back on the After Dark for patreon.com/artofdarkpod. And we're going to talk about some more of Gurdjieff's exercises. We're going to talk some more with our friend Sam Buntz, and we're going to talk about Gurdjieff and sex. So if you want that, you got to get into the Patreon. And I'm going to read us out with 3 more of Gurdjieff's exercises. And so, gentlemen, just stew in these as we exit. Experiment of the part of the driver, the intellect, in order that he may learn his business. The formatory apparatus reporting the behavior of the organism to the eye. Formulation of observations concurrent with the act of observation. Okay. I'll be here all night. I'm just going to be thinking about all that in the dead air. Just in dead air. What? Thanks again, sir.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thanks for having me.